So we're super lucky today to have Melissa Lane and Amelia McGuinness with us from the Food and Mood Centre at Deakin University. The centre is a world-leading research centre that aims to understand the complex ways in which what we eat influences our mental health. They're a team of researchers, and there's a number of backgrounds that they've all come from. So Melissa, who's with us today, holds a Bachelor of Nursing, Diploma in Psychology and a Bachelor of Psychosocial Science. And Amelia holds a Diploma of Human Nutrition, Bachelor of Health and Medical Sciences and a Bachelor of Biomedical Science. So yeah, both girls are very, very well versed, and their current research at the Food and Mood Centre, which they might share a little bit more about, is around how the gut microbiota are able to potentially influence our mental health through what we call the gut-brain axis, which some of you might have heard of before. So Melissa and Amelia, very big welcome, and I'll throw it over to yourselves.
Thanks very much. I'll just share my screen. Alrighty. Everyone can see the Food and Mood Centre logo?
Yep, perfect, Mel.
Great. And I'll just give you remote control now, Amelia, so when you take over.
Perfect, thank you.
Are ready to roll. Okay. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As Ebony suggested, we're from the Food and Mood Centre, which is one of the only research centres of its kind, exploring how food can impact mood and the brain. The Food and Mood Centre is based in Geelong. It's part of Deakin University, and it published the first ever study showing that diet can improve symptoms of depression. And we're really excited to share some of this groundbreaking research with you today. We're both Gen Yers, which means that we're tech friendly, and we're really happy for you to tweet and take photos throughout the presentation. Be sure to tag us and use these handles and hashtags. So more specifically, today we'll be asking the following questions. Why is it important to think about mental health and diet? What's the connection between food and mood? How is diet influencing our brain and mental health? And then we'll finish with some practical strategies for success. So let's kick it off with why it's important to think about mental health. Mental health and substance use disorders are the leading cause of disability globally. So what does this mean? It means that mental disorders cause the most amount of burden to people's lives, preventing them from living a fulfilling life, going to work or school, or contributing to their community. And this is more than any other chronic condition, including cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. In 2013, 10% of the global population lived with anxiety or depression. Mental health disorders don't discriminate. They occur across the globe and are seen in both developed and developing countries. And research also suggests that almost 50% of Australians will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. And over 3 million Australians, so that's 1 in 5 people, are currently living with anxiety or depression. And just highlighting the research around young people specifically, as I know we've got parents in the audience. And as teens experience a time of rapid growth, we know that their bodies are obviously changing, but so is their brain. And studies have found that during this period, 3/4 of all mental disorders that a person might experience in their life will emerge. This is really important to consider because it means that 1 in 4 young people are living with a mental disorder like anxiety or depression. And this slide shows some characteristics of good mental health. You obviously might not be able to experience all of these, but you'll likely experience some. And with this slide showing the opposite side of the coin and what it means to have poor mental health, where you might not be able to experience some or all of these things. So it's not just about feeling down. Poor mental health can affect your ability to have healthy relationships and engage in healthy behaviours such as exercise. It might also affect your ability to cope with stress and challenges. So why is it now important to think about diet? Well, we've all heard the phrase, you are what you eat, and food is essential fuel to help our bodies thrive. We know that. But it's only recently that science has begun to understand the relationship between food and how we think and feel. There's now substantial evidence showing that food is as important to physical health as it is to mental health. But diet in the 21st century is quite different to the one that our ancestors would have eaten. Whilst we used to eat typically untainted whole foods, our diets now consist of highly processed, energy-dense, which just means high-calorie foods that contain large amounts of low-quality fats, refined sugars, and artificial food additives. And at the same time, this modern-day diet doesn't contain enough fruits, veggies, or other healthy foods. And the industrialization of the food system and new processing techniques has made processed foods highly affordable, palatable, convenient, and accessible. We now even have apps that will bring so-called fast food straight to our door. So these type of foods are quite literally at our fingertips, and it's influencing the food choices that we make. So this problem is happening right here in Australia. And here you can see a map of Sydney suburbs and the number of fast food outlets. Each purple dot reflects a fast food outlet, and each pink square reflects an area with one or more fast food outlets, but it's an area that has no supermarket or greengrocer nearby. So you can see that there's an overwhelming number of fast food outlets and a lack of supermarkets or greengrocers. So when you see things like this, it's no wonder that we're eating poorly. And studies have shown that this modern day way of eating is quite literally killing us, with poor diet being the leading risk factor for premature death. So poor diet is responsible for 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. So that's more deaths than any other risk factor, including smoking. So let's define a poor diet. We're bombarded with mixed messages in the media about what's healthy and what's unhealthy. But the evidence suggests that a poor diet is one that's low in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, all of which contain high amounts of fiber and different types of fiber, omega-3 fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And it's not just about what we're not eating, but what we're eating in place of more healthy foods. So a poor diet is one that's high in red meat, particularly grain-fed and processed types, added sugars, sugar-sweetened beverages, trans fat, and salt. And these statistics show that more than 95% of Australian adults aren't eating enough vegetables each day, and the rates for consumption of dairy, fruit, and grains are only marginally better. Across all main 5 food groups listed in this graph, less than 1/3 of the population is eating enough of these healthy foods. But what's more shocking is the results in children. Less than 1% of Australian kids are eating enough veg. And these statistics aren't much better for dairy, meat, fruit, and grains, all of which we know are vital for children's development and well-being. Our mental health is influenced by many different factors. Unlike other aspects that we don't have control over those, such as the culture that we live within or our environment, we can directly change our diets. And this is key because it means that we're able to make choices that impact our mental health. And because of this, nutrition plays a key role in the prevention and the treatment of mental disorders. So what's now the connection between food and mood? So as I previously mentioned, we're beginning to understand that diet is of equal importance to mental health as it is to physical health. And the research exploring how diet can affect mental health is known as nutritional psychiatry. This area has obviously become a hot topic of interest recently. And over the next few slides, I'll give you an overview of some of the studies that link diet and mental health. And this will include studies that have examined the association between healthier eating and the risk of depression. So research that has pooled, which just means that it's joined the results from a number of separate studies, has consistently found that a healthy dietary pattern or your habitual dietary intake reduces the risk of developing depression. The Mediterranean, Norwegian, Japanese, and other traditional diets have all been shown to lower the risk of depression over time. And the similarity across all of these diets is that they have high amounts of the good stuff that we mentioned before, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and a limited amount of processed junk foods. And we can even put a number on that, as those who consume a healthier diet are 35% less likely to have depression and 32% less likely to have anxiety. So it's pretty clear that what you eat does matter to mental health. So we talked about prevention and how a healthier diet can prevent the development of depression, but what about those who already have depression? Can food help treat low mood? The short answer is yes, and a few trials have set out to answer this research question. One of these studies is the SMILES trial. So the SMILES trial was conducted here in Melbourne by the Food and Mood Centre. It was developed by Rachel Opie, Felice Jacka, the director of the Food and Mood Centre, and others. and it looked at the impact of a diet intervention on symptoms of depression. It's just important to point out here, though, that within this study, diet is being suggested on top of usual treatment. So diet is really just one more layer we can add to the onion to help improve mental health. And we're not suggesting that dietary changes should be used as an alternative to medications or any other therapies recommended by treating practitioners. So getting back to the study, participants with depression were randomly allocated to either a diet group or to a control group. And the control group can be thought of as a comparison group. So this social support comparison group was used to help tell us whether changes in symptoms of depression were due to the effects of social interaction or due to the diet itself. And participants in the diet group received nutritional counselling regarding a diet that was termed the Modified Mediterranean Diet. This diet is a blend of the Mediterranean diet and the Australian Dietary Guidelines, so it has a little more red meat and dairy than the traditional Mediterranean diet. Part of the advice given by the dietitian was to include vegetables with every meal, select fruits, vegetables and nuts as snacks, include legumes 3 to 4 times a week, eat oily fish at least 2 times, choose olive oil as the main fat. And in fact, participants consumed up to 3 tablespoons of olive oil per day. And they were also advised to save sweets for special occasions. So the strategies were made to be practical and easy. And from the results, we can see here that those who were in the social support control group, alongside their normal treatment, they ended up with a reduction in their depression symptoms. But the results were greater for those in the dietary intervention group, with diet significantly and to a greater extent reducing symptoms of depression. So this shows that diet alongside usual treatment was an effective strategy for depression. And another way to think about this is that while depressive symptoms improved in both groups, those who followed the Modified Mediterranean Diet had much lower levels of depression at the end of the 12-week trial. And in the research world, you know you're onto something good if someone else can do a similar study and get the same results. And that's exactly what happened. A study conducted in South Australia with similar methods has replicated these findings in what is known as the Healthy Med study. And we just wanted to point out here that there's a common misconception that eating healthier costs more. But when the Smiles researchers compared the cost of the Modified Mediterranean Diet versus eating normally, the ModiMed diet was more cost effective at approximately $30 less per week. So to recap, research at the moment is telling us a couple of main things. A healthy whole food diet can reduce your risk of developing depression. And for those who have depression, a healthy whole food diet, specifically the Mediterranean diet, has been shown to reduce symptoms of depression. And on top of this, it's affordable. So you might now be asking yourself, this is all great, but how does diet influence our mental health? And this is where I'll pass you over to Amelia to explain more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mel. Hi, everybody. Ebony, how are we going for time? Do I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Make it 7. Yep.
7. Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So Melissa's given a fantastic introduction to the relationship between food and mood. And so now I'm going to just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the ways that food might be influencing our mood. So how is this actually happening? Do I have access to, there we go. Yes, I do. Perfect. Okay. So before we think about our mental health, I'm just going to quickly touch on our brain health. So it doesn't surprise people, or it's not surprising to think that things that are influencing our brain might be therefore having an influence on our mental health. And what some researchers at Deakin did is they had a look at this little area of people's brain known as the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a small region in the brain that's important for learning, memory, but also for mental health and people's mood. And what they found was that people who were having a less healthful diet actually had a smaller hippocampus compared to those having a more healthful diet. So this kind of poses this question, is junk food actually able to shrink our brain? So not only is it influencing our mental health, but it's actually affecting our physical brain health as well, eating those less healthful diets. My area of research is something that we look at quite a lot at the Food and Mood Center is the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is this invisible universe of bacteria, fungi, viruses that live inside our gastrointestinal system. And we specifically focus on the bacteria in our gut, in our lower gastrointestinal system. And basically we provide these bacteria with food and shelter, and they help us with a lot of things as well. So often we think of bacteria, we think of getting a cold, we think of negative kind of aspects of bacteria, but we have these amazing bacteria in our gut. They help us extract nutrients from our food. They keep our gut wall healthy. They are able to interact with our immune system. They actually fight off bad bacteria for us. And they're really involved in producing neurotransmitters, which are these brain chemicals that are really important for mood and mental health as well. So we live in this symbiotic relationship, which means that we take care of each other. There are good and bad bacteria that exist, and we actually have a little bit of both in our gut. And what we kind of want to do is create an environment where these good bacteria, or the bacteria that are beneficial for our health, can really thrive. And we kind of want to try to prevent a negative kind of environment, an inflamed gut, because that's when the bacteria who are less healthful for us really start to grow and start to have an impact on our gastrointestinal system. And the microbiome has been implicated in pretty much now every condition you can think of: obesity, diabetes, cancer, and really in mental health as well. What about, so mechanisms? So, why do we think that the microbiome might be having an influence? We know a lot of what we know from these fecal microbiota transplants, and they are exactly as they sound, and they involve taking fecal matter, which is what we collect our microbiome in, because it passes through our gastrointestinal system, and we actually transplant fecal matter from one person or one animal into someone else and see what happens. So one of the first studies that did this took twins who are genetically identical, however, one had obesity and one was lean. And they took fecal matter from each of these twins and transplanted it into mice who were genetically identical as well. And what they found was that the mouse that received fecal matter from the obese twin actually became obese. So this is one of the first studies that showed us that from transferring microbiome, we can actually transfer a disease phenotype or a disease state. And what they've actually done is replicate this in depression. So they took people who had either major depression or without major depression. They took fecal matter from these people, transplanted it into mice, and the mice that received the fecal matter from people with depression actually started showing symptoms of depression. And we've got many ways that we can measure that in a mouse or in animals. And this is a really important study because it showed us that we might actually, or that we can actually transfer depression. And we can do that through fecal matter, which is evident that it's got something to do with the microbiome, or it really starts to say that the microbiome plays some really important roles in that process. So how do the gut and the brain communicate with each other? We actually have a direct pathway from our gut to our brain, and this is through the vagus nerve. And we actually have more nerve endings in our gastrointestinal system than we have in the human spine. So it's really highly innervated. We've got so much nervous system that intertwined with our gastrointestinal system. And I think people can really understand that when you think about when you're nervous for a test, or when you're feeling upset, often you have gastrointestinal symptoms with that. So it's not surprising that if you can have this downward effect of your mental health affecting your gut, then it's not really surprising that that can happen in the opposite direction, and things that are happening in your gut can actually influence your mental health. Not only through the vagus nerve can the bacteria influence the rest of our body, but it actually, as I mentioned at the start, can interact with the immune system. These bacteria produce lots of different chemicals for our body, such as short-chain fatty acids, which interact with the immune system as well, but also are really important for keeping our gut really healthy. And they can also produce neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are really important for our mental health as well. So we've got all of these processes, and there's so many more that these gut bacteria can influence. And what's really interesting is that in depression, all of these processes that the gut microbiome are able to influence are different. So people with depression have this increased state of inflammation. all of the different molecules in their body are at different levels. They're a bit all over the shop, and they've got different levels of neurotransmitters as well. So again, these really interesting connections between the two really make this a really interesting area of research. And Mel spoke earlier about the importance of diet for mental health, is that diet is a modifiable factor. And for the gut microbiome, it's the same story. If you think about where food goes when you eat it, it goes to your gastrointestinal system, it goes to your gut. So it's not surprising that it's one of the biggest drivers of influencing the microbiome. So it starts to pose the bigger question: the gut, the microbiome, the diet, the link, it's there. And this is something that we're really working on, trying to kind of disentangle what these relationships are. And it's important to note that it's our long-term dietary patterns that affect our gut the most. So every year there's a new fad diet, something comes in, superfoods, you name it. And studies have actually shown that if you change your diet completely, so they did a study where they either put people on an entirely plant-based diet or a high animal product diet, and within 24 hours, the two groups had completely different microbiomes. So diet can rapidly change the microbiome within 24 hours, but when they put people back onto their regular diet, back onto the same diet, within 48 hours, so within 2 days, their microbiomes were back to completely the same as they were before they went onto that dietary change. So whilst the food that we can eat can influence our microbiome very quickly, it's really what we're going to do long-term. It's making those long-term sustainable changes that's going to really influence our microbiome the most. Those fad diets, our microbiome has a set point and it's going to want to go back to that. So trying to do the right thing over a longer period of time is really going to be the most beneficial. So I just thought I'd end with some practical strategies for success. So it's easy enough for us to tell you all of this information, but how can you actually go home today and start making those meaningful changes? I think that that's the most interesting part about this food-mood connection. You can actually, everyone can go home today and start making those small changes in their life to improve their own mental health. And I think that's a really empowering thing for people, and something that you don't necessarily always have with other things that people talk about in the kind of health space. The best method, learn and teach. So everyone's learning all the time. I personally, a couple of months ago when I was really busy before everything, started subscribing to HelloFresh. And I have learned so much about how to cook and different things to cook through doing that. So, you know, everyone is learning. Not everyone's going to be on MasterChef. Try something new. Improve your own self-esteem. Once you have self-confidence, now I just kind of make things up, and I can look in the fridge and just whip up anything. But that's something that it took me a while to learn how to do. And I think that once you start getting the hang of it, that's really, really beneficial. And I think what we focus on the most at the Food and Mood Centre is on what to eat, not on what not to eat. So for example, if you've got kids and every morning they're having Vegemite toast for breakfast and they have to have that Vegemite toast, that's fine. Instead of having white bread, maybe try swapping it out for a piece of wholemeal bread or a piece of grainy bread. So you don't have to think about cutting things out. Try and put the good things in. Young people look up to their parents and look up to brothers and sisters and other people around them. So trying to get the whole family involved in making those changes is really beneficial. And getting kids involved, taking them with you to the supermarket, asking them what they want to cook for dinner. We've gone to a lot of schools and we often give people the task of going home and trying one new thing that day. So, and then we'll have, you know, parents messaging us and being like, oh, my son wanted to try avocado. So little things like that is really good. And it gives them that autonomous motivation. It starts to empower them, and then it's going to make it easier for them when they get older to make those decisions for themselves. But there are a lot of barriers. We do acknowledge that. As Mel touched on, those food deserts, there is so much fast food and so much advertising for unhealthful food. And people don't necessarily learn how to cook and how to plan and all of those kind of things. So there are a lot of barriers, and we really do understand that. But I think that the first step is having people come to these kind of things and start to try and figure it all out. We're not going to preach to you about fruit and vegetables. Obviously, everyone knows that these are good for you. Just trying to increase the amount that you have at every meal. Try to add vegetables to every single meal that you're having, and just try to limit those fast foods. No one's perfect. We're not asking everyone to eat a perfect diet. I know I don't. You've got to look after yourself as well. And not be too hard on yourself, I think, is the main thing. But if you can try and get vegetables into every snack, every meal, and just start small, like I spoke about with the swapping out of the toast, just start with small changes, and then eventually I think it does get easier. And don't forget to rely on fruit as a snack as well. So kids have smaller serving amounts, adults 2 to 3 pieces a day. And yeah, they're a really good swap out that I think a lot of people forget about. Tips for a busy life: go easy. Have canned fish. Try frozen packets of vegetables. Frozen vegetables is a really big misconception. They're just as helpful for you as vegetables on the shelf. Some people say that they actually might be more helpful because they're snap frozen at the time. Do meal prep. So at the start of the week, make up a whole heap of things, put them in the freezer, have it there so that the option is there for you. And takeaway is okay. It's okay to have takeaway if you're on the go, but just try and choose the more healthful option. So try getting sushi or try getting a salad roll or something like that. And eating well on a budget. So try cooking at home, have some base recipes. So have those couple of things in the freezer. Organize your fridge and pantry at the start of the week, get everything that you need, and try and choose the things that are in season. So dietary variety is amazing for your microbiome as well. So trying to keep having some different things here and there as well. I think I'm almost finished. Sorry, Ebony. I think that's almost my 7 minutes. If anyone wants to see any recipe solutions or ideas, Jamie Oliver Cooking with Kids is a great option. It's got some really easy things there to get kids involved, and also the Nutrition Australia website. And overall take-home messages: nutrition matters to both your mental and brain health. Diet is modifiable and is a great way to go home today and start making those changes to improve your own health. And variety of diet is one of the best things that you can do as well. So choosing a whole range of nutritious food. If anyone wants to learn more, we have this Food and Mood online free course that's available. I think the last round might have just started, but you might still be able to join in. Otherwise, they do roll through throughout the year. So if you want to learn a bit more, that's for free and that's available online. And before we finish, we do have to just acknowledge everyone that works at the Food and Mood Centre, and specifically our sponsors, including the Fernwood Foundation, Wilson Foundation, Australian Rotary Health, and the NHMRC, as well as the Impact Centre, which is the centre that we're a part of. Thank you.
Amelia, thank you so much. You can take a breath now after all that. I think we covered a lot of ground in the last 20 minutes, and it was a huge ask of us to get the girls to squeeze that presentation into a small amount of time. So kudos on doing that. I know, like, that's just super interesting for me, and it's really exciting that there's so many people looking into this space a little bit more now. And I'm sure that, you know, evidence changes so quickly, and we can only keep learning from what's coming out. So just wanted to open the floor. I don't think there's been anything come through the chat. I did just pop a link in there. If you'd like to enter your email address or even your phone number, we'll make sure that all those resources that Amelia mentioned in her slides get to you, and we can also send you a copy of her slides as well as a link to the recording of this session if you want to revisit bits back. So if you just follow that link, you can enter your email and contact details there.
I can see as well that someone wrote there's a zoo in my poo in the chat box. So that's the actual kids book that my boss has, the director of the Food and Mood Centre has written for children, all about the microbiome with amazing pictures. So jump online and have a look at that one. That's for kids. She's also written a book called Brain Changer, which is for adults, and it explains everything that Melissa and I spoke about today, but in a wonderful book with lots of resources. So Brain Changer for adults, and there's a zoo in my poo for kids.
Beautiful, thank you. We'll make sure we list those two references when we send an email out, and sorry as well, Amelia.
Thank you.